everybody, welcome back to another video. My name is Haley, otherwise known as the Fictional Scholar, and today we are going to be analyzing my second favorite character from Avatar: The Last Airbender, and that is Katara. So, I'm not the smartest person at times, and I'm still learning, like, everything about like recording and editing, and I'd already filmed this analysis before like a week ago, and when I went to edit I realized that I didn't have the microphone turned on whenever I filmed. So the audio is terrible on that first recording for Katara's analysis. And instead of spending the time and the effort that I don't have to go in and fix the audio correctly, I just decided to reshoot the video, much like my mom suggested to me. And unfortunately, I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. And Mom, you were right, as you always are. You were right. And here I am recording this again. This is actually my third time trying to get this done. And I tried to film it again last night and my SIM card was full, so it cut me off halfway through recording and I didn't realize it. It's been fun. But it is what it is. It's life. Things happen. So here we are. Third time is a charm. We are going to get into this analysis of Katara. She's always been like my second favorite, right beside Zuko of the show. I've always loved her character growth. I've always loved what she stands for in the show. And spoiler warning for those who haven't seen the show or gotten all the way through, here's your spoiler warning. I will be talking about all 3 seasons with Katara. So if you haven't seen all 3 seasons, if you don't want to spoil yourself, here's your opportunity to avoid spoilers. And recently with Katara's character, I feel like she's been under fire recently. Like, she's become like the brunt of a lot of jokes for people, like especially like regarding her speeches about hope, or the biggest thing is like her talking about her mom. It's become like a meme and things that people like make fun of her for, and be like, oh, someone talks about the Fire Nation and it's Katara, my mom was killed by the Fire Nation. And people kind of make fun of her for it and like really criticize her character for how much she talks about her mom being killed. Which, yeah, she's gonna talk about her mom dying. She's a traumatized teenager. So we're really going to get into that into this video, and really kind of, this is like a defense of Katara's character. Like, this character analysis is a defense of her character. And we are going to be doing this differently than I did Prince Zuko's character analysis. We're not going to be looking season by season with Katara and kind of looking like an overall character arc and character change. We are going to be looking at different aspects of Katara's personality, really analyzing them, and then we're going to spend a good portion of this video analyzing Katara's trauma. Yay! And really kind of like show like how all these things made her who she is, and like who she is as a person, as a character. And it's gonna be fun. I'm excited to do this. Again, I've always loved Katara's character. So without further ado, let's get into this video. Here is my analysis of Katara for Avatar: The Last Airbender. Okay, so the first aspect of Katara's character is the one that she is most known for. We're going to look at this motherly figure that Katara has become. She is definitely the mom of the group, and she has a lot of very like motherly aspects. She's very kind, caring, and compassionate. And she very much so cares about others and will do anything for them, especially the people she loves, even sometimes people she doesn't even know. She is a very compassionate person, and it plays to her strengths. Sometimes it ends up being her downfall because she cares a little too much, and that ends up hurting her. But Katara, throughout the whole entirety of the show, has just shown how much of a kind and caring mom figure that she is. She's always taking care of everyone, especially her little group. And let's all be honest here, if it wasn't for Katara, that group would not have made it as far as they did. That's just a fact. But, you know, like, she's always been the one that's taking care of her group. She's there to listen to everybody. She's there to talk with everybody. And most importantly, she's kind of there to keep everybody in that group together. She does it several times throughout the course of the show, but one of the most notable moments for Katara, like really keeping her group together and really like kind of pushing them forward, is when they're in the desert in season 2 after Appa is taken, and they're in this desert, and you know, Aang is overcome by rage, and he's not thinking clearly. He is just furious that his bison is missing. Toph can't do much anyways, because once she's blind too, she's in the desert where she can't really feel any vibrations with her feet because of the shifty sand and all of that. And Sokka goes drink some cactus juice. He was kind of useless in that episode. But it really gave Katara a chance to shine, and she really took over and took charge and says, no, we're getting out of this desert and we're gonna do it together. Like, none of us are gonna die here. None of us are gonna have anything bad happen to us. Like, come on, let's go. And she was the MVP of that episode. That really goes to show, like, how much she is able to just push her own feelings aside and be like, no, we need this done. We need to get this done. We need to do this. And she really steps into this role of this mom to the group, and she shows that not only by making sure things get done or making sure that they do certain things, she also does this by really taking care of the ones in that group and really making sure that she understands them. Like, several times she's the one that goes to talk to people. Like, she'll go to talk to Sokka. She knows her brother very well. She'll talk to Sokka and she'll listen to Sokka. And she will go and listen to Aang whenever he's frustrated or he needs someone to vent to or talk things out. She's always the first person to be like, hey, let's talk. Let's talk about this. Let me know what you're feeling. Like in The Storm, or season 1, episode 12, in The Storm, like, she's the one that goes to Aang and is just like, we need to talk about this. Like, there's obviously something bothering you. You really need to get it off your chest. Let's talk. And Katara is so good at listening to others, like when they're talking about like their problems or their frustrations and everything, and it just, she's so good at that. And she'll listen to, like, even Toph, like, yes, her and Toph butt heads a lot, but she listens to Toph and probably understands Toph more than Toph thinks she does. And so several times she listens to Toph and she cares about Toph, kind of as if, you know, Toph was like her sister or her own child, like flesh and blood. They're all family, and Katara treats them as such. She nurtures others so well, and she even does this to people she doesn't know, her enemies. In season 2, episode 3, when they return to Omashu and it's taken over by the Fire Nation, Katara, after, you know, they get out of Omashu, there's this mix-up where the general's son, his little baby son, got kind of swept away with the crowd and ends up with all these Earth Kingdom civilians and earthbenders and everything like that. And Katara is the first one to just start cooing over this baby and taking care of this baby. An enemy's baby. A general has high-ranking powers, you know, and instead of using that again, she's like, oh, let's take care of this baby. And even like where they're like, oh, well, he's gonna be a killer when he grows up, and she's like, this is a baby. Because you're like, does this look like the face of a killer to you? Like, this is an innocent baby. She instantly is able to recognize that. And, you know, they help get that baby back to his family. Something that, you know, like in a war, that's probably not the most common thing to do. And again, she offers help to her enemies more than once. When, in season 2, again, when Iroh is cheap-shotted by Azula during the chase, and, you know, Iroh's severely hurt because of it, and Zuko is just beside himself with shock and anger and just pain. And Katara to her known enemy, someone who has been chasing them and fighting against them, trying to capture Aang for months now, she immediately goes up to him and says, Zuko, I can help. Forget the fact that he's been hunting them down for months at a time. She sees that her enemy is in pain, and instead of taking advantage of the situation, or instead of just leaving, she goes up to him and is like, let me help you. That takes a special kind of person to do something like that, to be completely honest. Of course, Zuko doesn't take her help because he's not in his right mind at that moment, and he's just so frustrated and angry, which is understandable because he saw Iroh get hurt. But he doesn't take the help, and then they leave. And then again, Katara offers help to her enemies when they're in prison. Her and Zuko are in prison together in Ba Sing Se. We're going to be really diving deep into that in a little while. But again, you know, after they're talking and everything, Katara offers to heal Zuko's scar. Again, this is the Prince of the Fire Nation. Her enemy, someone who has been constantly attacking and hunting them down for months. And because she built this kind of connection with him, and she's like, she kind of sees him clearly for the first time, she goes, I want to help him. It takes such a special kind of person to be able to willingly help somebody like that. And to offer that help. And she was going to... It's so telling of Katara's character, like how loving and caring she truly is. That she not only offers her help and her love towards people she loves and knows, but also she offers that same aid to people she doesn't know or to people who are her enemies. In season 3, The Painted Lady, she goes to a Fire Nation village that is oppressing... A Fire Nation village that's oppressed by soldiers, and offers and helps them. Half the time it's without them even knowing it's her, and then when it's found out, she's like, I couldn't just do nothing. And this is going to lead into one of the other aspects of her character that we're going to talk about, and it's her passion. But Katara, she says, no, I will never ever abandon people who need me. So telling of her character and who she is and what she believes in. It's beautiful, and I love her so much for it. Now, this motherly side of Katara is the one she's most known for, and because of that, people try to put Katara in a box, and it's like, oh, well, she's the mom character, and that's all there is to her. No. That's such a huge disservice to Katara's character and who she is, that it's like you can't put such a complex character in a box saying she's one thing and one thing only. It's just such a disservice to who she is, and I've always hated it. And it goes straight into this other aspect of Katara's character that's a little talked about, but it's still not as well known as, you know, the mom side of Katara, and that is her passion. Katara is a very, very passionate person for several things. She always stands up for what she believes in. First and foremost, like, she does not stand for any sort of sexism or anything like that. In season 1, episode 1, when we're first introduced to Katara, she's telling Sokka off for his being like, oh, leave it to a girl to screw things up. And she goes off at him. Like, yes, ma'am. And, you know, like, she always stands up for what she believes, and she doesn't stand for any sort of injustice or anything of the sort. And one of the most notable moments of her standing up for what she believes and exuding this passion is at the end of season 1, when Katara stands up to Pakku, who refuses to teach her fighting just because she's a girl, and Katara is having none of it. She said, this isn't gonna work. And Katara goes to fight against, she challenges Pakku, basically challenges the patriarchy of that tribe. And she's like, no, I'm not apologizing for you. I'm not just gonna sit here quietly. While Katara at first had originally decided, like, fine, whatever, I'll put my own feelings to the side, because in the end it's more important for Aang to learn waterbending because he's the Avatar. But when her passion and that resolve is put to the test and is questioned, when Pakku and the leader kind of demand an apology from Katara, she snaps and goes off. And she's like, I'll be outside if you're man enough to fight me. Ma'am. Like, yes. And she does just that. She goes up against Pakku, and that fight is not about whether she won or lost. That's not what the fight was about. The fight was about proving a point, and for Katara to stand her ground and fight for what she believed in, and she did just that. She challenged Pakku, and that passion and that stubbornness that she possessed really led her to perform her best at that moment. And that, with the little side story of Pakku being who her grandmother was supposed to marry, along with those stories kind of like intertwining and really like playing into one another, Katara proves that, like, no, women can fight too. It's these customs that need to kind of change. And she ends up being taught by Pakku to fight. And she ends up being the best waterbender because of it. It's so amazing. And that's not the only instance that we have of Katara standing up for what she believes in, or talking or fighting for what she believes in. We get that really early on in season 1 when Haru is imprisoned by the Fire Nation soldiers, and he's taken away, and Katara, she feels a sense of responsibility for it because she feels like she played a part in getting him captured, and she's like, no, I'm gonna go save, like, rescue him. But not only that, I'm not just gonna save Haru, I'm going to save every other earthbender who is locked up in this prison. And she does. Ladies and gentlemen, Katara. But she goes to this prison, and, you know, like, she's trying to convince these people to get their courage back, to get their hope back, and to fight back and try to escape. Of course, when you're in prison, like, they've lost all their courage, their hope, like, it's all been diminished over time, and they feel like there's nothing they can do. And Katara, instead of leaving, being like, okay, I found them, we're gonna get them out, we'll come back another time. Instead of leaving, she says, no, I'm not giving up on these people, I'm not going anywhere. And Sokka really confirms the fact that, you know, this is just who Katara is as a character, as a person, because it's not just this one-off instance where she gets like this just because it's personal. No, apparently she does this a lot, because Sokka even says, he's like, I hate when you get like this. So that's saying that Katara has done this many times before, and she will do this many times after, and she does. And, you know, Katara really gives the earthbenders an opportunity to fight back, and she gives beautiful speeches. Like, I don't know why people hate on Katara's speeches. I think they're amazing. Like, they really do. Like, they pack a punch whenever she speaks. Like, you know, she gives them these speeches to try to encourage them and influence them to fight back, to take up their stance and go against their oppressors. Of course, it doesn't really work, but Katara is not trying to inspire every single earthbender in that prison. She just needed to inspire one. And she did. And that's all it took. She just needed one, and she got Haru on her side. Haru starts to fight back, and it dominoed. Once Haru started, then Haru's father started, and then all the other earthbenders started going, and it just dominoed into this massive counterattack where all these prisoners fought against their oppressors, and they won. They broke free. And Katara led them to do that. And it's amazing. Like, it's so amazing to think that Katara inspiring one person led to the rebellion and the freedom of all these Earth Kingdom people. she was the point of her speeches was never to inspire everybody. It was just to inspire one, and she did. And they got out, and they thanked her afterwards. They're like, "Thank you so much, like, for giving us that courage, giving us this hope back." Because Katara, as much as she talks about hope and gives these speeches about hope and courage, while it's meant for other people's, it's just as much meant for herself as well. And we're gonna get to that too. And again, in The Painted Lady, Katara just, she stands up for injustice when she sees it. She sees these Fire Nation people, like this Fire Nation village, these people being oppressed by abusive soldiers, and she's like, I'm not having any of that. I'm gonna help them. I'm gonna get them out of this poverty. Like, they're sick, they need medicine, they need food, they need their river cleaned. And she just goes above and beyond. And again, they're in enemy territory. These are technically their enemies, and yet she recognizes they're in need and she helps. Because she has that passion, because she stands up for other people, and she doesn't tolerate anything like that. She's such a passionate person, and her passion compared with that loving and nurturing side just coincides so well together, and just build up that confidence and that power that she has with her natural talents of being a waterbender and how much she works for what she wants. It's fantastic, and I love her for it. You know, there are several instances where Katara just puts her foot down and she stands up for what she thinks and stands up for what she believes is right. And it's so telling of her character. Again, it's so telling of what type of person she is. But again, people try to put Katara in a box, and they try to kind of dim down that passion and just put her in the, like, oh, well, she's just a nurturing person. She just cares. Yes, she cares, but there's so much more to it than just caring. Like, there's so much more to it than just that. And that leads us into... This leads us into the next aspect of Katara's character that really gets shut down and brushed to the side so much, not just by people who have watched the show, but by people in the show, like people in her group and those around her. It gets brushed to the side and ignored, or kind of like put down and not acknowledged. And that is this fiery side of Katara, this anger that she possesses. Because a lot of people, again, they put Katara in a box. And they're like, oh, well, she's this sweet, mothering, nurturing character. She couldn't possibly be mad. She's mad. And when she shows her anger, she shows her anger. Like, Katara actually has quite a bit of a temper. And it doesn't get acknowledged, and it kind of gets brushed to the side by a lot. Like, Sokka kind of brushes it to the side. Maybe it's because he's used to it, so he just doesn't want to deal with it, and he kind of brushes off like, no, like, she can be mad at anybody, just don't let her talk to me. I don't know what. But Aang brushes off her anger too, and he doesn't acknowledge it. He tries to diminish it a lot too. Like, prime example, when Katara's going off at Pakku and she challenges him to go fight outside. You know, Aang's like, oh, well, she didn't really mean that. Like, she didn't mean what she said. And Sokka's like, no, she meant it. But Aang doesn't acknowledge this side of Katara, which... that's a whole other story. That's a whole other analysis that we're not going to do right now. But Aang doesn't acknowledge the side of Katara because he very much sees her as this loving and caring person. That he completely kind of ignores this side of her, in a sense. Or at least he doesn't acknowledge it for what it is. And he tries to be like, oh, well, she didn't really mean that. She's not really angry. No, Aang, she's angry. I mean, she's a very sassy person. She's super sarcastic. Her sarcasm, like, is on the same level as Sokka's at times. And that's saying something, you know, like, Sokka is super sarcastic. But, you know, she has all of this sass, this stubbornness, and this anger, and everything that gets brought up so many times throughout the show. But because it doesn't fit into her stereotypical loving nature, it kind of gets overlooked and kind of brushed to the side a lot. You know, one of the most obvious ones is like when Katara snaps at Aang in the waterbending scroll. Season 1, episode 9, the waterbending scroll. Like, Katara gets angry that Aang is like succeeding so quickly when it's taken her months and months and like years of just her struggling trying to learn this by herself. And like Aang's like, oh well, I got it down, no problem, I'm the Avatar. And he wasn't the most subtle about it either, which probably didn't help. He's a kid. He's a 12-year-old kid. He doesn't really know everything and social cues and whatnot, but that's fine. But, you know, Katara just blows up and snaps at him. And, you know, he's super offended at her, and she apologized. She immediately was like, okay, like, I know I did that wrong. Like, I'm sorry. But there's that instance. And then, you know, when Toph joins the group, again, her and Toph butt heads because they're a little more similar than people like to admit they are, her and Toph. And, you know, during the chase in season 2, during the chase, like, they're all exhausted, of course. But, oh my goodness, the insults that Katara hurls at Toph during that time, like, you cannot tell me she said that being completely calm and not angry. The stars sure are beautiful tonight. Too bad you can't see them. Like, you can't tell me that girl ain't angry. She is. And oh my goodness. You know, like, these fights go along and Aang tries to, like, again, he's not really saying, like, hey, we're all, like, exhausted. We need to really just figure this out. And, you know, like, neither him or Sokka really do this. They're just like, whatever, we're tired. Let's go to sleep. Stop fighting. Instead of being like, all right, let's talk this out, let's sort it out, we'll figure out what's really going on, how they're finding us, all that. They're just like, whatever. And, you know, they kind of dismiss both her and Toph's anger at that point. And, you know, Katara's iconic, I'm completely calm, when she's not calm. You know, it's played off as comedy, and it is, it's funny. But also it's like, it's a way that they kind of dismiss this anger of hers. Again, I don't like that they dismiss her anger. I really don't. But, you know, like, she fights with Toph on more than one occasion. Like, again, in the Runaway. You know, her and Toph go head to head again. And, you know, Sokka's smart. He's just like, I'm not getting into this. Like, I'm not part of it. But, you know, like, it kind of bothers me how much they dismiss Katara's anger. It always has. I'm just like, she's kind of angry, but nobody's really, like, talking to her about it. Like, nobody's really addressing this with her. You know, ironically enough, the only person who acknowledges Katara's anger and really just takes it in and addresses it with her is Prince Zuko. You know, and we'll really get into that a little bit later when we start discussing her trauma, because that anger and her trauma, they coincide really nicely with one another. And, you know, Zuko is the only one, like, especially when they're in prison together in Ba Sing Se, Katara lets him have it. She is going off at Zuko at this point. And Zuko, instead of dismissing it or just, you know, blowing back up at her, which would have escalated that so much worse, you know, he just listens and takes it. And then, you know, when Katara finally was like, the Fire Nation took my mother away from me, that's when Zuko turns around and he's like, I'm sorry. It's something we have in common. He's the one who establishes that connection and this common ground for them. And you can tell how much it shocks Katara. She's like, what? Because one, someone acknowledged her anger. They didn't just dismiss it. And two, someone actually wants to talk to her about why she's angry. For as much as Katara listens to everybody else, nobody listens to her except for Zuko. Make it make sense. You know, she's always the one who is there for other people, but when it comes down for it, nobody is really there for her, at least emotionally. Nobody was there for her. Zuko is the first person to ever step into that role of being there for Katara emotionally. Now, of course, he betrays her at the end of season 2, so you know that doesn't go as planned. But that anger of Katara's is such a valid part of her character, and you know, like her being a little hothead can't be ignored in the complexity of her character because it's very much shaped from part of her childhood. And like, even if you look at Sokka's a bit of a hothead too. He gets angry at things and nobody faults him for it, and everybody kind of like acknowledges that part for it. But it's like when Katara gets angry, it's like, oh well, nah, she doesn't really, she's not really angry, or that's not really part of her character. She can't be angry. She's the mom. Huh? But that leads us into the meat of this discussion, and that is Katara's trauma. Now, Katara doesn't just have the trauma of losing her mom. So her mom died, was killed, murdered, when Katara was 8 years old. And I think a lot of people forget that she was that young. You know, not only did Katara lose her mom, she was the last person with her mom when her mom was seen alive. And she saw the face of the man who killed her mom. That already is going to traumatize the child a lot. And not only that, it is said that Katara kind of stepped into the role of a mom, and she took on all these responsibilities, all these extra tasks after her mom passed away, or was killed. I say passed away, it's nicer. You know, after her mom was gone, she stepped into this role really young, at 8 years old, and really stepped into a role of a mom figure. As an 8-year-old child, that's difficult. Super, super difficult. But she did it. And again, like that in itself was probably not the healthiest thing for her to do. One, because it made her bury all of those feelings and that trauma she was feeling just so she, again, could be there for others. Huh. Well, imagine that. And again, with that trauma of her mom dying and then her trying to fill this void left by their mom, a few years later, her dad goes off to war. So she feels this abandonment from her father as well, because they were left with just their grandmother. And they were left, what Katara feels like she was left alone from her parents. And even though Katara, she knows why her dad had to leave, like they're at war, her dad had to leave to go fight. She understands that. Deep down, she knows that there was a good and valid reason why her dad had to leave, but that doesn't stop that feeling of being abandoned, of being left behind. You know, Sokka felt it too. When their dad left, he felt like he was being left behind, and that their dad was going somewhere he couldn't follow, and he hated that. Katara was just as much feeling that abandonment, just like Sokka was. And so there's a lot of this anger, there's a lot of resentment, and a lot of pain and rage that Katara has just suppressed and hidden deep down. And the seeds for that were planted all the way back in season 1, okay? Season 1, it's shown that Katara talks about her mom, and when she talks about it, she's sad. She's sad that her mom's gone. Of course she's sad her mom's gone. You know? Like, that makes total sense. And we don't really see Sokka talking about his mom's death. But also, we're going to really get into this. Little bit of psychoanalyzing their characters and their mindset at this time. Sokka had a little bit more time to process his mother's death, just because he had those few years when his dad was there, he probably didn't have as much responsibilities. But after his dad left, of course, Sokka took on a lot of responsibilities. He really started striving to be this warrior that his father would be proud of, that he could be proud of himself. And, you know, Katara points this out, season 1, episode 1, when she goes off at Sokka, you know, her anger makes an appearance that early in the season, in the show. Imagine that. But you know, Katara really goes off. She's like, I've been doing all this work while you've been off playing soldier. you know, and she's like, ever since mom died, I've been doing this. So it's already been established at the very beginning of the show that Katara's been doing all of this while Sokka maybe hasn't been doing as much. So that there's a little bit of leniency, a little bit of freedom that Sokka probably had to kind of get more time to process that trauma, process that grief that Katara didn't get, because she immediately buried everything within her, which is so unhealthy. She buried everything within her, hid it all, and took on this task of helping others, despite that grief and that pain that she was obviously feeling. And so, you know, trauma is processed differently by every single person. Everyone can, like, a group of people can experience the same trauma, and every single one of them can process it differently. There's no exception, you know, for Sokka and Katara too. The two of them process their trauma completely differently. Katara, the only way she could really go through this process of trying to process her trauma was talking about her mom in any way that she could. Honestly, like, that's completely normal. I don't know if the people who make fun of Katara for talking about her mom have really just never been through that trauma and grief of losing someone, like, super close to you that you love, like a parent or a sibling or, like, someone in your family. Like, I don't know if they've never experienced that, but it's like, it's so normal to talk about people you've lost. Like, that's how you keep their memory alive. That's how you keep them close to you, in a sense. And, you know, Katara does just that. Like, her talking about her mom is the way to keep her mom close to her, a way to keep her mom's memory alive. And of course she doesn't want to lose that completely. Like, she was 8, so, like, she probably feared growing up that she was going to forget about her mom some. And she didn't want that to happen. I hope y'all can't hear that air conditioner in the background. That's loud. Texas heat, need air. But because Katara stepped into this role so young, she never had the chance to really process her trauma, and she suppressed it for years and years and years. And as a teenager, you know, finally, like, this pain and this rage is finally start to bubble out, and it has nowhere to go, especially with this anger that she feels towards the man who killed her mom, that she saw him, you know, and it has nowhere to go because, one, nobody was ever there to talk to Katara. Again, Katara has always been the one to be there for everybody else, but nobody has been there for her. It seemed like that setup was established when she was younger. You know, she's the one who stepped into the role and started taking care of everybody, despite being an 8-year-old. And, you know, and then, oh, this group dynamic when, like, she joins the Avatar and they go off. She's the one who steps into the role of caring and taking care of everybody, regardless of how she feels, regardless of the emotions she feels. And no one ever asks how she's doing, if she's okay. Why? Why is that? The only person who ever really seems to care if she's okay is Zuko. It doesn't make sense. But there's this dynamic that, you know, Katara's always been the one. She kind of puts up this front that she's okay and that she just wants to take care of everyone. Wow. No wonder I relate to Katara so much. We're not talking about me right now. We're talking about Katara. Anyways, because everybody processes trauma differently, and because, you know, Katara had stepped into this role, there's a lot of different aspects of this trauma, especially concerning losing her mom, that people tend to overlook and ignore. One is that she has survivor's guilt, because, and especially after she learns why her mom died, which is a little bit later on, but she still has this survivor's guilt that she lived while her mom died, even though she was right there with her mom, and her mom's like, you can leave, go get your dad, I'm fine, I got this. Lo and behold, Katara goes, listens, comes back, and she's gone. She's dead. Like, that would be, I can only imagine how traumatizing that must have been for Katara. She'd be like, she was just alive when I was just here, I was just with her, and then she's gone. Like, of course she's traumatized. Of course that's going to mess her up. This poor girl. You know, and again, like, her anger had nowhere to go because one, she buried all of her feelings, which is never a good idea. She buried all of her feelings to step into this role, and instead of facing this anger and this trauma and this pain and everything, she kind of ignored it. And then the more she grew up, the more her anger had nowhere to go because she had no one to really talk to about it. She had no one to vent to. Enter Zuko. And we're really about to get into like the Southern Raiders, but before that, like, a lot of people have said like Katara was so out of pocket when she talked to Sokka about like the way they lost their mom. Don't come at me for this. So when Katara says you didn't love her the way I did, very uncalled for. Yes, I completely agree. She probably shouldn't have said that. She could have said several other things and it would have been okay. And obviously Sokka's hurt from it. Katara probably regretted it the moment that came out of her mouth. However, there is truth to that statement. And this is why. Because it was established that one, Sokka was closer to their father to begin with. He looked up to his dad so much, he always wanting to go to his dad kind of for his father's approval. And you know, he's very close to his father. Not saying that he wasn't close to his mother. It's just shown more in the show how much Sokka loved and looked up to his dad. Katara was obviously closer to her mom. Like, she seemed that way, and she always talks about her mom so much more than she talks about her dad. You know. But it's a known fact that Sokka... Okay. Like, Sokka doesn't remember his mom. In season 3, episode 7, The Runaway, when Sokka takes Toph to the side to talk about, like, you know, Toph's behavior and also, like, Katara, like, as like, the mom figure, like, how, like, they can put up with everything. And Sokka says he depends on it. He kind of relies on this side of Katara because... And he explains, he said Katara stepped into that role so young and really, you know, took over, and she was so strong during that time, which is such an amazing thing to do. Like, Katara really did such an incredible thing. But Sokka admits that he doesn't even remember what his mom looked like. Every time he tries to picture his mom, he sees Katara. So, you know, and he doesn't talk about his mom as much as Katara does. And while, yes, Sokka still has the same amount of trauma from losing a parent, they processed it so differently. And it shows, like, Sokka did love his mother. I'm not saying that he didn't. But I do think there's a little bit of truth in saying that Katara loved her mom in a different way than Sokka did. Because Katara clearly remembers her mom's face. She knows exactly what her mom looked like. And remembers so much about her mother, while Sokka doesn't. Sokka sees Katara as his mother figure. He doesn't remember his mom, and it's so shown, like, it's proven that, because Sokka himself admits it. And while I still agree, like, I still don't think Katara should have said what she said to him in the Southern Raiders, I still do believe there's some truth to that, because again, Sokka kind of had more time to process that trauma and kind of get himself through it, and because of the way he grew up and he saw Katara as this mom figure, his memory of his real mother kind of faded. Again, that's probably one of the ways he dealt with that trauma of losing a parent. His trauma is a completely different set than what Katara's is. And I think people try to compare the two and say that they're exactly the same, but it's not. Like, their traumas, while they suffered the same thing of, like, they both lost a parent and their sibling, like, they both lost their mom. They processed it completely differently, and that makes the difference in their characters. Like, Sokka wasn't as shaped from the death of his mom as much as Katara was. She And I think it's to do with how she dealt with it too, like the way she buried everything inside of her, took on this role, and really became a mother figure, not only to her little family but to her village as well at such a young age. You know, it that difference really impacted who they were as people and as characters growing up. But with that being said, I still don't think Katara should have said that to Sokka, because both of them love their mother dearly. Their trauma is just completely different, and the way they hold their mother in regards to it is different. That's the point I'm trying to make. So people like who love I love Sokka too. Like, so don't come at me for all this. Like, but you know, like, her trauma causes her a lot of pain and a lot of anger. It's pretty common in trauma. And so, like, she shows these moments of anger throughout the first and second seasons, so it shouldn't have been a shock to people when in season 3 her anger really takes off. Like, but so many people are like, oh, well, this is so out of character for Katara. Like, why is she so angry all of a sudden? It's like, what do you mean all of a sudden? She's shown her anger several times throughout the first and second seasons. Like, it's not anything new. It just got amplified for a few reasons. One, Katara had finally reached her tipping point, her boiling point. Like, after so many years of condensing everything and keeping everything locked in, all of it just finally started to boil over, and she had to get it out somehow. And because her anger and everything was kind of dismissed, and even some of her pain was kind of dismissed, like, and glossed over in the first 2 seasons, so that when it really hit, like, the boiling point and just really blew up in everybody's face, like, nobody knew what to do. And nobody knew how to handle Katara, because they had ignored that part of her for so long, and they were just like, oh, well, now what? Like, now what do I do? But again, Katara is the most open and the most vulnerable with Zuko. All people. She's the most open with Zuko. And Zuko is the one who actually notices this anger and acknowledges it and sets out to do something about it. You know, and because Katara is so much seen as, oh, she's supposed to be this caring and loving person, it's like when this anger of hers is shown and spotlighted, people are like, well, where did this come from? Like, this isn't who she is. It's like, no, it is. It's very much part of who she is. People just like to ignore that part of her. So it shouldn't have been a shock to people in season 3 when her anger starts to really come out, but it was. I don't get it, but it was. But the first time we really see her, like, her anger start to come out is the beginning of season 3 when she talks with her dad. Because while Katara very much so loves her dad, there's still that bit of resentment and that anger for him leaving. Even though, again, Katara completely understands why he left. She knows that he had to, but there's still that abandonment that she felt from her father. And so, like, you know, when she finally just is letting it out for the first time in years, she's just venting to her dad, and what was supposed to be about Aang, and he's like, you're talking about me. Her dad was easily able to recognize, oh, this isn't about Aang, this is about me. And it's because, you know, while Katara had acknowledged that her father left for a reason and everything, all those feelings, that pain and anger and resentment, got pushed down because he wasn't there. He was away from her, so it wasn't present in her mind. So when Hakoda came back and he was suddenly there with them again, everything that she had been feeling and suppressing just came back up. Like, it was almost triggered for her again. It was just like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, I'm angry at you. You left me. And it's very understandable. Like, when someone comes back into your life after, like, a time where you like, suppress all these feelings, and it's just like, boom, it pops up again. Shouldn't be that surprising that it does. And, you know, Katara talks with her father, and she's like, how could you leave us? She's like, I know we had our grandmother. I know you had to go, but why? And she's like, I'm so hurt and angry, and just, she's in so much pain. She's crying. And her father hugs her, and he kind of validates the way he's feeling, and he apologizes, and he's like, I thought of you every night. Like, I didn't want to leave. And it's such a special moment for Katara because she finally feels like she was validated for these feelings, for this pain, and she was comforted by her dad, and he was able to acknowledge, like, I'm sorry I put you through this. We both know I had to, but I'm still sorry, and I missed you as much as you missed me. It's such a sweet moment. It's just kind of like, that's what Katara needed. And after that, like, you can tell, like, because she was actually able to talk about her feelings, like, it kind of simmers down for a while, and then that anger spikes back up whenever Prince Zuko joins their group. For several reasons. One, Zuko betrayed Katara, so she's still holding a grudge against that. She doesn't trust him at the moment, which, valid, very valid. And he has to work to redeem himself in her eyes, which he does. But also, like, not only is this like, oh my goodness, someone who's betrayed me is coming back, again, it gets reiterated in her mind. This is someone from the Fire Nation, someone who has caused her so much pain. And now he's just back. And they've accepted him into their group. So it's just this constant reminder for her of, like, these people took my mom away from me. These people have caused me so much pain. Like, not only did they take my mom, in a way they took her dad away from her too, because the Fire Nation is the one who started the war. So, like, the Fire Nation is the source of all this trauma, and for Zuko to just kind of be there like, hi. Of course it's unwarranted, but, like, her anger at Zuko and the anger against the Fire Nation, like, really mixed together. And again, it really has nowhere to go. And Katara, even though she knows deep down that Zuko wasn't responsible for anything like that, she can't separate the two clearly, because, like, all this anger has just been built up and built up and built up, and it has nowhere to go, and they've mixed. Her anger at Zuko has mixed so much with just the anger she has in general at the Fire Nation that she doesn't take the time to really, like, sit down and be like, okay, like, this goes over here, this, like, she doesn't do that. She's just like, no, I'm angry and I'm directing it at him, which isn't really fair, but I get it. At the same time, I totally get it. And Zuko, like, again, he is familiar with Katara's anger because he witnessed it and accepted it in the Crossroads of Destiny at the end of season 2 when they were in prison together. Like, he really understood her anger, and he was like, oh, I kind of get this. And, when he joins again, like, Katara is, well, for those who say she's not angry or, like, anything other than, like, loving, do they not listen to her insults? Like, not only her insults against, like, Toph or Sokka or anybody like that, but, like, when Zuko joins the group and he's like, oh, well, I lost my firebending, she's like, well, maybe you aren't as good as you think you are. Like, dang, girl, like, get him. Like, she roasts him. Like, without a second thought. Like, she roasts him. Like, it's funny, but it's like, dang, she's that bitter. And she's bitter because she's spent years concealing everything and not doing anything about it, which isn't the healthiest thing to do. But she did it. And, and Zuko really sees this, especially in the Southern Raiders, where he saves her from rocks crushing her, and she's just like, alright, get off me. Like, I'm not crushed. Shoo shoo. And Zuko's really be like, okay, it's gone on long enough. What's going on? And he goes, Katara, like, kind of goes off and is like, yeah, you don't deserve this. Which, again, if she wasn't angry or bitter, she wouldn't have said that. Huh. And Zuko goes to confront her about it. He doesn't just dismiss her anger. He doesn't dismiss what she's feeling. He's like, no, I need to talk to her about this. We need to talk and get this sorted out. And he does just that. He goes to Katara and he's like, okay, what's going on with you? Everybody's trusting me. Like, what's holding you back? And Katara, again, she is so open with Zuko. And very just honest, like, brutally honest and angry with him. Like, she isn't with that with anybody else on the show. And she's able to just like be like, oh, they trust you. She's like, I was the first person to trust you and you betrayed me. And Zuko's like, yeah, and he's like, what can I do to make it up to you? And Katara, she again, her misplaced anger at this point is kind of boiling over, and she's like, well, you can bring my mom back. Obviously Zuko didn't have anything to do with like the death of her mom. She realizes that, Zuko realizes that, but just that one statement, like after like she shoulders her way past him and like storms off, he's like, oh, I see what's going on. She's mixed this anger at me with the anger of losing her mom. He's like, okay, that makes sense, but what can I do about it? And so like Zuko, instead of just being like, well, she's angry at these two things, that's not fair, like whatever, I can't do anything about that, he goes to be like, no, I want to find a way to like help her vent out this anger and get to where she's like, she feels a sense of justice or a sense of peace, at least in a way. And so he does that. Nobody else does that for Katara. Nobody. But he does. He cares that much about her and about how she sees him, how he sees her, that he's like, no, I want to help her in any way I can. And so Zuko sets off to go to Sokka's tent to really find out like more information about like what happened to their mom, because he knows he can't ask Katara at this point because she'll just yell at him again. So he goes, okay, I need to talk to Sokka. And that scene with Sokka, that's a whole other scene. That just pure comedy. But like Sokka goes over what happens and he's like, it's not a day I like to remember, which again, that's another part of Sokka's psyche. He doesn't like to remember the things that hurt him. That's besides the point. That's another thing. But Sokka fills in Zuko on like what happens, and Zuko's like, okay, like I know the symbol. I know that we can track down the person who took Katara's mom from him, just so she can confront him, have this visual confrontation with her past and with her trauma to make her face it. And they do just that. And the debate between like whether Aang was right when he's talking to Katara, or whether Zuko's right, and the way they approach this, that's a whole other discussion in and of itself. But it goes to show like the way Sokka and Aang really kind of confronted Katara and were treating her, it shows that they did not understand her anger and her pain and this trauma. Like Aang processed his trauma completely different than Katara did. Sokka processed his trauma completely different than Katara did, and how Aang did. They all processed it differently, but it was like they wouldn't acknowledge the way Katara processed hers, or was trying to. They didn't want her to be so angry. It was just like, I get that you don't want your friend, like someone you love and care about, I get you don't want them to be angry, and you don't want them to be so bitter, but also at the same time, you can't force somebody to heal the way you want them to. They have to heal their own way in their own time. And Aang and Sokka were kind of trying to force Katara to heal a certain way and to do things a certain way. Like, no, you don't need to face him, you just need to forgive him. And Katara was like, no. Katara was like, he's a monster, like, I can't do that. And they're like, oh, well, you sound like Jet. And Katara was instantly like, no. There is a huge difference between how Jet and Katara were handling things. And there's this huge argument, and Aang makes a good point by saying, like, it's easy to do nothing, but it's hard to forgive. And that's a very true statement. It is very hard to forgive people who have wronged you, or have hurt you, or have caused you pain and trauma. But at the same time, it's like, Aang and Katara are very different people. Just like Aang is a very different avatar than Roku or Kyoshi is. He's very different from Kyoshi. Just like how he's a very different avatar from them, Katara is a very different person, like in terms of personality and the way she processes things, than he or anybody else in their group is. And they didn't see eye to eye on that, and it was like they couldn't accept the fact that she needed to do this in order to start healing. Not saying like, oh, this is the end all to her healing process. She needs this to just boom, get it over with. It's like, no, this is to start her healing process. She needed to do this and face this man. Do I think Zuko was really taking Katara to go kill this man? No. I really don't think Zuko ever thought Katara was actually capable of killing someone. And it really showed that Katara's anger like had so reached her boiling point, and she was just so angry and blinded by this rage. And it's shown because, yes, Katara is a very sweet and loving person by nature, but because she had all of this unchecked anger, it blew up. Not only in her face, it blew up on others as well, and it made her do things she normally wouldn't. Like, she swore she wouldn't bloodbend again. And out of that pure anger and rage and pain, she did. Now, granted, it was on the wrong man, and she probably, we don't really get into this, but I can assume that she probably felt so guilty for using that power that she would like forsook. Like she had forsaken that power and was like, I don't want to use it. And then she used it on the wrong man out of anger. I can guarantee Katara felt so guilty and sad. After like all of that had calmed down, she probably felt really guilty about it. But, Zuko goes and he helps Katara face her past. And for the first time when they meet Yan-Ra, out in the little countryside, and they're by the trees and the grass, he's on the path. When they finally meet him, Katara is no longer hiding from this pain, and she's done that. It's like a defense mechanism almost for Katara, that she hides her trauma and her pain by burying it within her and helping others and being there for others, because the moment someone pays attention to her own emotions and feelings, that's when she loses it. Like every time, like it's actually focused and pinpointed that Katara is feeling a certain type of way, about someone or a situation, her emotions just well up and she just goes off, and she's very emotional. There's nothing wrong with that. But because nobody ever really focuses on her a lot, those emotions get buried in. And when Zuko, the times that he does focus on it and really bring it out, guess what happens? Blows up. She blows up when she's finally like asked to confront her feelings, because she's been hiding it for so long, and because nobody has ever really asked her how she's feeling. So when someone finally acknowledges and confronts that, she doesn't know what to do with all these emotions that she's hidden for like several years. And Zuko is the one who really just takes her, and he lets her confront these emotions. He lets her confront this trauma and just gives her a way to vent these frustrations and these feelings. And Katara finally gets the full story of why her mother died. She didn't know the whole thing, so for years it's probably been plaguing her mind and being like, well, why did she die? Why was it that why did he kill her? Because she didn't know that part. And when she finally does, her survivor's guilt is probably amplified so much, because she learns like, oh, my mom died in my place. Like, her mom lied to Yan-Ra saying like, oh, I'm the last waterbender, take me prisoner. And he's like, no, I'm not taking prisoners today, and he kills her. And for Katara to learn that after so many years of just thinking like, oh, I don't really know why my mom died, but I was the last one to see her alive, and now she's gone, and it's my fault. And then it gets amplified so much more, because she's like, I should have been the one to die, but instead it was my mom. Like, that's gotta hurt her so much more. And she's dealing with this new information while she's, has all this pain and anger already just welling up within her. And it just overflows, and she attacks Yan-Ra, but she stopped herself. And I think that's something that's so telling of her personality and her character, that despite this pain and rage and all this trauma that she's finally accepting and confronting, and she sees the man who's the source, the direct source of it, for the first time since the incident happened. instead of letting her anger, which she could have, in her anger, she would have easily killed him. She was going to. But because of who Katara is at heart, she didn't let that anger completely 100% consume her. And she was able to recognize this is not just gonna hurt like his family and everything. She was like, this is gonna hurt me so much more if I do this. And she's able to stop it herself, and she's like, as much as I hate you, I just can't do it. And Katara finally had a chance to let her anger out and just let it go. And she didn't exactly just let it go and forgive him and whatnot. Oh, it's all happy. No, of course she's not. And it always annoyed me. I didn't really understand completely why growing up, why it annoyed me that Aang said he was proud of her. But even more as an adult, I'm like, I would not want someone to say, oh, I'm so proud of you for not letting your anger consume you, like that would irritate me. But that rubs me the wrong way for some reason. But it's because like Katara didn't forgive him. And it's not to say that she'll never forgive him. She says it at the time. She was like, I'll never forgive him. But also Katara just learned the truth of why her mom died. So while yes, she finally got to confront her trauma and face it, she had a new truth and reality that she had to start accepting, is that her mom died in her place. So that survivor's guilt got amplified. And she was trying to process it as she's like sitting on this dock and looking at the ocean. She's probably trying to process it fully, like, I was supposed to die and my mom died in my place. So of course she's going to be like, I'm never going to forgive him, because she just learned this new information that she has to process and get through. I think the more Katara grows up and the more she moves on, she would eventually forgive him. But at that moment, there was no chance. Like, imagine if you were in a situation like that where someone had murdered your mother and you didn't know you didn't know why they had done it. Like, you knew who it was, but you didn't know why, and you finally get to the point where you get to confront this person and you get the truth, and they're like, well, I was gonna kill you instead, but your mother died in your place. Like, that's just additional trauma for Katara to try to process. And this is the first time Katara has actually been able to confront this trauma that she's been suppressing for years. And then there's this additional stacked on top of it. Of course she's not going to be okay. Of course there's a lot more that she has to try to process and internalize and really get through. And again, nobody really understood that. Maybe because Katara didn't tell them, which granted is probably the situation. It seemed like Zuko kind of filled them in on some of the details. I doubt Zuko told them all of it, because he probably respected Katara's privacy. But also, like, the trauma shaped Katara's character. Like, in a way, it made her who she was. It didn't define her, but it helped shape her. Because she became such a loving, kind, and compassionate person because she stepped into that role so young, and because she started taking care of others so young. So naturally, the more she grew up, the more she wanted to take care of others, and she just truly loved people. And she loved those that she probably wasn't supposed to. She loved her enemies. She loved people she didn't even know. And she cared about them. Like, I love her character so much, and her trauma is not something that should be taken lightly or taken as a joke, because, like, it shapes who she is as a character, and it's something that is so amazing to see, like, in her character growth, from just, acknowledging the sadness of losing her mother in, like, the first season or so, and, like, at the end of season 2, really acknowledging that she's angry about it, and then towards the end of season 3, like, it coming to a head and being like, I'm gonna confront this because there's so much rage and anger that I can't contain anymore because I have been suppressing it. I'm gonna confront this person, just let it out. Like, that in itself is such an amazing development and such an amazing character story, but people people gloss over it and forget it because they're like, oh, well, she's like the mom character, or, oh, like, this anger came out of nowhere. I don't really understand this. It doesn't make sense. It makes so much sense. So much sense. And, you know, like, Katara's trauma is just as valid as everybody else's trauma in that show. They're all traumatized children, okay? She's no exception. Just because she's the mom character or is supposed to be like really kind and loving does not mean that she's not just as traumatized or as angry as everybody else is. You know, like, it doesn't make sense why there's some sort of prejudice against her. And like, of course she's gonna talk about her mom, and I bet you anything she talked about her mom even more after the Southern Raiders, because she finally knew the truth and she was like, and you know, Katara has always been such a compassionate, kind, and loving character, and she's always been this kind of like hothead as well, and it's such a disservice to her character to not properly recognize all aspects of her personality and really trying to understand like the way she acts that is shaped by her trauma, and understanding her trauma in general, like losing a parent that young and then stepping into the role that she did, really taking care of everybody else and just suppressing her own feelings and emotions, which I don't recommend, by the way. It's not really a great way to go about things, but you know, like, her trauma is often not as credited to her, and her anger isn't as credited to her as it is to others. Like, it's more accepted for other characters, but for some reason when it comes to Katara, it just doesn't, it's not as accepted or as talked about. It's such a huge disservice to who she is. I will stand on that grave until I die because she's such an incredible character and such a complex and deep character. So this is my analysis on Katara's character. I've probably missed a few things. I know I've missed some things, and I probably didn't go into things as much as I would have liked, but I hope you've enjoyed this analysis. If y'all think of anything else that I've missed or maybe didn't cover as much that you would like me to, make sure you comment down below and let me know. If you like this analysis, please let me know. Give a like and a thumbs up. But give a like. That is a thumbs up. And also, if you disagree with some of the points, that's fine. You can let me know in the comments. We can have a discussion. I don't mind those. Just be nice about it, please. But yeah, if you want to see other analysis like this, I have my Zuko analysis already up. It'll appear in one of these corners at the end of the video. And yeah, you can go check that out. The next character analysis video I'll be doing is over James Gillies from Murdoch Mysteries. That'll be a fun one to do, so be sure you're on the lookout for that. If you want to make sure you don't miss any of my character analysis or any other videos I post, make sure you subscribe down below and hit the notification button. I think it's down there. I don't know. I'm still learning. Make sure you subscribe and give this a like. Make sure you follow all of my social medias so you keep up to date with what I'm doing. And yeah, that's about it. I love Katara's character. Hopefully you enjoyed this analysis, and I will see you next time, scholars. Bye!